Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Community and Culture Collective, where we keep tabs on the most important stories in business and education. In addition to disrupting the education industry, COVID-19 also served as a catalyst for change. The pandemic highlighted a number of issues that were present in education previously, but had gone unrecognized. Host J.W. Marshall was joined on the Voices of the E-Learning podcast by education thought leader and author Michael Horn to discuss his new book, From Reopen to Reinvent, and explore how the classroom can evolve for the better.
Hello and welcome everyone to this episode of Voices of E-Learning. I'm your host, J.W. Marshall with Summit K-12. We're so excited to have you join us for this episode as we talk about a new book coming out by our good friend of the show, Michael Horn, who is not only an education thought leader, but also the author of From Reopen to Reinvent. Michael, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well and better to be with you.
Excellent. And we'll start off the way we start all of our shows in case someone hasn't seen one of the past episodes you joined. Give our audience a sense of who are you and what do you love about what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I got into this world of education working with Clay Christensen, the father of disruptive innovation theory. We co-founded a nonprofit think tank, the Christensen Institute, and then written a number of books on the future of education, joined the Entangled Group in 2015. We were both supporting institutions in transformation, but also spinning up new for-profits and nonprofits. And then we got acquired by Guild. I've been a senior strategist there since. Guild works on the other side of some of what we're going to talk today, really with adult workers. We support companies in being able to upskill and give their frontline employees the career paths that they need to succeed through education. So I've been doing a bunch of that, and then I sort of fill time with podcasting and other such fun. To answer your question, though, yeah, what gets me excited? I mean, look, my mission is to help everyone be able to live in a world in which they're able to build their passions and fulfill their human potential. I've never had a day where I've worked, right? Like that's just such a meaningful set of things to work on for people. And I'm inspired daily to help from what little I can offer to help move us forward in that goal.
I love it. And then talking before the show, your new book lines up almost perfectly with the vision and the mission of our show. So let's jump right into the new book. What inspired you to write this book, and give us a little bit of an overview?
Yeah, absolutely. So I thought I was done writing books on K-12 education. I was wrong. The pandemic hit, and Diane Tavner, who leads Summit Public Schools, a network of 11 middle and high schools, she and I started a podcast called Class Disrupted. And we started having a set of conversations on air about like, how would you take this moment and not just run back to normal, but actually transform, and amidst all the pain, amidst all the challenges, try to see it as an opportunity to reinvent education. And so we have dissected a lot of elements of our current education system and a lot of the traditional arguments in our education system, and tried to say there's a third way through this that, like allows people to hold on to what's sacred to them, but creates a much better future for all children. And out of that, it just to me felt like a book. And so I put it together, and a lot of it was like, hey, yes, educators are sinking under a lot right now, but I also know when I talk to them, they don't want to go back to normal either. They don't want to go back to an education system that was, quite frankly, not working for the vast majority of kids. And I'd argue not working optimally for anyone before the pandemic. So how can I give them a vision, a set of tools to start to move forward, make progress to better serve all learners? And that was really how the book idea came out of, and then really rapidly wrote it because it was a lot of the stuff I'd been saying and writing over the preceding couple of years.
And not to give away the whole book, because we want people to purchase the book. I believe it's coming out this summer. But this is a conversation we've been talking about. You've been talking about. A lot of people have been talking about. What can you give us that is going to be concrete in this book that is going to be the best reason for educators, administrators to purchase? What are they going to get out of it?
Yeah, absolutely. So look, the book comes out in July, and basically it starts with a conversation of how do you even shift from something that has been so threatening, so debilitating, to an opportunity framing. Like, that sounds insensitive, right, on the surface for so many educators and students right now living day to day on the front lines. How do you even do that? And so it gives a methodology for doing it that makes it contained, allows them to take into account their school board politics, their leadership politics, whatever it might be, and dedicate some resources to this, and frankly, take advantage of some of the federal government funding that's coming down right now. And then we shift into, what should you do with this? And we say, sunset this notion of learning loss. Think about this moment as being one about fueling kids' mastery, allowing them to be successful on a daily basis. What would that look like? And so we talk a lot about mastery-based or competency-based learning and how you do that, and some don'ts around that as well. And then I get into, okay, how would we think about a more sustainable profession for teachers? And then we think about, okay, parents are a major constituency in this. They clearly have the power to block change. How would you get them on board? What are they after? What's progress look like for parents? And then from there, we talk about, yes, the technology and the culture of the school is so critical. And then a process for de-risking this change. And how do you get people to cooperate when maybe they disagree on what you're trying to do? So that's literally chapter by chapter, what I'm walking through in the book, and trying to give people both some tools that they can use and apply in their situation, but frankly, my very strong opinions of how we ought to reinvent in some cases, and a little more prescriptive, I think, than I've been in the past about that.
I love it. And we probably don't have time to dive into each one of those chapter headings that you just gave me, but I want to spend a little time in the competency-based learning, the mastery learning, for any educators, administrators out there that have heard the term and are maybe shy to admit that they don't fully grasp that concept. Give us a little bit of, a foundation there, and your spin on how we can actually make that a realization in our K-12 schools.
So I love that you picked on that one, JW, because that is literally, I think, the biggest meat of the book. It is certainly the main theme of the biggest chapter in the book, but it also reappears in about 4 or 5 chapters and basically says, if we don't make this shift to mastery-based learning, we will remain stuck in what is currently a zero-sum education system, where for every winner, there is a loser. And that is actually one of the obstacles in my mind to change, is that certain families feel like if you make that shift, of whatever your reform is, like, is my kid going to lose out before they were going to win? And the argument underpinning the book is that a shift to a mastery-based learning system or a competency-based learning turns it from a zero sum to a positive sum where we can all benefit. Why is that? Well, because fundamentally, right now, our education system is built on sorting students, labeling them through grades and things of that nature. And the basic argument is that a mastery-based system, students don't fully leave a core concept, core application of skills and knowledge until they have demonstrated mastery. And so what that means is everyone's incentives in the system becomes around helping every single child succeed. Some will need more time on certain foundational concepts. Some will be able to whisk through and go deeper in something, but fundamentally orienting around mastery of the core competencies that we want students to have be able to know and do when they leave our K-12 education system. Everything orients around that. The time becomes variable, learning becomes the guarantee. Now, one last piece about this, because I think there's a lot of conversation right now in the ethos around mastery-based or competency-based learning. A lot of districts, they change their grading system, right? Because they say, well, the A through F grading system has tons of flaws, which I document in the book, and it labels students, we need to move to standards-based grading or something like that, like a 1 to 4 system. And one of the arguments I make in my book is, yeah, your grading system is going to change as a result of moving to mastery-based learning, but just changing grading alone is not actually moving to mastery-based learning, right? Like, that's just like what we call something. Fundamentally, the commitment has to be around making sure every child masters, and the reports or the grades or whatever are just to give a reflection, to give information on, like, what has Michael mastered so far? What is he working on? What hasn't he gotten to do yet? And that's fundamentally what that becomes about. And by the way, it can also show like Michael really loves geeking out on this topic, and he's gone super deep on a bunch of projects there, which better represents who I am becoming as an individual.
Howard Schultz recently returned to Starbucks for his third stint in charge of the coffee giant with the goal of quelling pro-union sentiment in their stores. Daniel Litwin explored how Starbucks and Schultz are going about doing this and the lessons that other businesses can learn.
Starbucks is facing a reckoning. Since December, the company has been wrapped up in a watershed unionizing movement. Baristas across the country, forming Starbucks Workers United, have successfully unionized more than 60 stores, with over 250 stores organizing to date. Guiding the union avoidance campaign is Starbucks' legacy leader, Mr. Howard Schultz, who was brought back in mid-March to put an end to the union movement. The company hasn't shied away from its union-free stance, and it turned to Schultz to guide tactics because, as Starbucks leadership has explained, he is, quote, singularly capable of reconnecting the company with its workers. His strategies have pulled from a familiar union-busting playbook reminiscent of previous success in ending Starbucks' first union in 1987 and commonplace across major corporate union avoidance campaigns. So how is the world reacting to these strategies in 2022? From our analysis, it doesn't look like things are playing out how Schultz and Starbucks would like. Here's what our retail and labor experts have to say.
The typical playbook is you try to reach out to employees and then point out that you lose benefits if you join the union and so on. But I would advocate a different approach. That's the usual approach that's a kind of perceived as threats and very defensive. I would advocate a more aggressive, more proactive approach, as you call it, progressive approach, which is going and saying, I want to use this as an opportunity to set up listening sessions with my employees, not only in the locations that want to unionize everywhere. So I basically do a deep dive into their issues and problems right away, right? So, and anticipate that they have to really reach out to all those people in those unionized locations one-on-one and try to meet them and try to resolve very sincerely their problem.
After hosting several listening sessions with Starbucks partners, Schultz launched new benefits for the company, including new pay minimums, raises, expanded benefits, and maintenance and training support. However, he included a caveat. These benefits can only go to non-union employees and stores because the union is getting in the way and preventing Starbucks from sharing these benefits with all employees. This combo carrot and stick strategy is bringing its own round of criticism.
So to say that he can't give them those wages and benefits, he can't do it unilaterally, but he can do it by proposing it to the union. It's very simple to do. He's being disingenuous there. It's very clear that Starbucks is getting legal advice from, sort of the top management labor attorneys in the country. What they're doing is very consistent with what the kind of advice that these attorneys traditionally give their clients. The difference, though, is the environment is very, very different than it has been over the last 5, 10, 20, 25 years when these tactics have worked. And I think that's the one thing that Starbucks really hasn't grasped, that this isn't business as usual. The kind of tactics that companies have been using to sort of bulldoze union organizing efforts in the past aren't well suited to the particular economic and political environment they're operating in.
You raise wages, you offer benefits, you make changes with the hope that people will see, well, we don't really have to go through this union organizing campaign. We're winning what we want because we're getting these material improvements. But it also, I think it misses the point, and it's a little bit, it's just a head scratcher how a CEO in the 21st century could continue to not understand this. In the case of Starbucks employees, You could raise benefits. You could say there's going to be this percentage increase in pay and in benefits. You can do those things. You can even change some policies unilaterally around scheduling. The problem is, what you're doing is you're saying to workers, you can have these things if you allow me to be in control.
In the retail sector, from my own work, I can say that some of these moves can sometimes have a bit of an effect. At Target, I observed that there was, some element of welfareism, some pretty low rent benefits that were, provided or offered at least to employees, and at least in the context of a high turnover workforce that was both highly precarious and highly transient, sort of by design, in terms of who they were hiring and how they were hiring, that this can have some dissuasion effect, or at least mitigate the appeal of some collective organized alternative like a union. It's hard to say whether a couple of small moves to provide more benefits will actually slow or stop this campaign. In the aggregate, I would say it's a good thing, right? It's a good thing that the drive to unionize is, in whatever way, raising the bar for workers.
Leadership style of a CEO can be a huge factor. A very vocal and visible CEO can set the tone all the way down to the shop floor. If Schultz takes a hard line, we can expect continued strong efforts to prevent unions from forming at the local level, and the company would likely take a very hard line at the bargaining table with workers who have formed unions. Alternatively, if Schultz is more accepting of the process, then he may find union contract negotiations to lead to just as many benefits for the company as for the employees.
Make sure to read the full piece on MarketScale.com. We were given another tragic reminder this week of the importance of school safety, as 19 students and 2 teachers were killed in a school shooting in Uvalde, Texas. When faced with tragedies like this, how should we talk to our children about what happened? Adam Coffrin, president of Safe Kids, Inc., is a school safety expert and frequent contributor to MarketScale. He joined us to share how to approach these difficult topics with children in light of the recent events.
The recent incident in Texas has brought to light a number of school safety concerns and issues across the country. However, one of the things that I'm sure many folks are wondering, especially if you're a parent, is how do I talk to my kids about this incident? Too often, we try to shield our children from the news and try to keep bad information and that loss of innocence away. However, this generation is more informed than ever before, and as much as parents try to maintain some sort of secrecy or try to hide this type of information from their children, it still seemingly permeates, whether it's through their friends talking about it, showing up on their electronic devices, or it's a breaking news story during a normal time they may be watching television or cartoons. And so this typically will lead to questions about what happened, what do I see, what's going on, why did this person hurt somebody? And as parents, and especially as educators, if these questions are coming up in the classroom, it's really hard to handle. That might be a topic that not only are we not prepared to talk about, but how do we talk about it so we're not inducing more fear and inducing more anxiety? And there are several ways in which we can talk to kids about violence in a way that I wouldn't necessarily say is soothing, however, is a way that we can have a conversation that might quell some of their fears or might otherwise stop some of their curiosity. And first and foremost, one of the ways that we can do this is to be honest and open with children, almost at any age. So often we want to either lie or try to shield or try to manipulate the story in some way, shape, form, or fashion from our children. However, this can actually have prolonged effects, especially if more information comes out, or if you're essentially caught in some sort of explanation that you can't unravel or you can't understand. And so being a bit open and honest and understanding that, yes, something bad did happen. And one of the ways to talk to children about that is people who hurt and people who help. And having a conversation that, there's people in the world that are very helpful. And who are some of these types of people? And, children may list, their parents, grandparents, maybe a teacher, other professions that they may see as very helpful people. However, there's the explanation or talking about who's maybe hurtful in life or harmful. And what are those types of people? And that could be, anything from strangers. You may hear some terminology like burglars, bad guys, or even some of the villains from their cartoon series they may perceive as harmful or hurtful people. But having that conversation with children and then being able to explain that, the world is full of very helpful people. However, there are occasional times that we might run into some harmful people. And in this particular incident, there was a harmful person at their school, but yet there were still people there and good people there and helpful people there to try to get them through it. And so working through these types of conversations and having a conversation about, what happens if we run into someone who's harmful, that they, are allowed to, tell a trusted adult that, to listen to mom or dad or the family member that they're with, older brother, in order to either get away or some sort of reactionary action to get away from these types of things. The other thing is to listen to their fears and understanding, what they might be fearful of. And it might surprise you what they are fearful of. And that's also a question, in seeing or trying to understand or make sense of what they've seen on television or on social media. Asking, okay, well, how does this make you feel? Or what are you fearful about? Or what makes you frightened? And that might lead to kind of where they're processing or how they're processing. In other words, you may believe that your child or student is scared about, the fact that there was a gun involved, or the fact that maybe, kids in and around their age were hurt. But their fear might actually lie in maybe how the person got in or why the person did that. Or is this, an older kid or a big bad bully who did this? So their fears may lie in something completely different than what you may perceive. Again, they may be trying to relate it back to their current experience if they're, having a bullying issue at school, or maybe there's an older kid that's a bit more frightening to them for whatever reason. And so listening to their fears may really lead the conversation into a very simple or easy answer that could very easily calm a lot of their questions or a lot of their anxiety. And, first and foremost, throughout all this questioning and answers and the conversation with kids, you want to set the calm example. Especially in younger kids, they're going to pick up on the emotion. They're going to pick up on anything that you may be still trying to process. And so having a calm demeanor and being able to set a calm example and talk about things in a compassionate and loving way will also help ease their fears, as opposed to being very excited or becoming very emotional about it. And that might be okay too, especially with older kids, with teenagers that that are trying to process what's going on. And many teenagers identify themselves in this generation as the generation of active shooters, amongst COVID and some of the other threats that have been posed against them, that may be becoming a bit emotional together and sharing that, we're both saddened by this, or we're both a bit afraid about this, but what can we do to work through it? And what are the tools or the resources that we can try to do, or the plan that we can make to move ahead? And so still setting that calm example, but being realistic and being human about it, especially if you have teenagers or those kids that are a little bit older. And really lastly, in some of the strategies, is to let them tell their story. And it kind of goes back a little bit to listening to their fears, but let them tell a story, or have what they're seeing or hearing maybe related to a cartoon series or a story or a comic book, a fictional novel that they've read, and to try to attach and work through some of those thoughts and processes of the imaginary world and a little bit as what happened into the real world, and let them kind of process a little bit what has happened. Again, going through these steps, and it's not necessarily step by step. One or two of these could easily work, with your child or with your students or your class. But having a set of these tools in your toolbox or on your tool belt to start to use to help work through some of the emotions and some of the fear and anxieties that kids may be trying to process during this time can help lead to not only some sort of resolution, but also that reduction of anxiety, and to get back to students feeling safe and really being safe, and not having to dwell on the actions or the incidents that they've seen now in the news.
Thanks for joining me for this focus on community and culture. Up next, Grant Harrell is going to drive us forward through some of the biggest stories in the world of transportation and energy.